Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. Hey, today we are talking all about tight ends and all about how to strategize for taking a tight end in your fantasy draft this season. So you definitely want to check it out. Here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast, coming at you from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Today, we are going to be talking about tight ends, all about tight ends and how to strategize for them and how to get a good one for your draft. But first of all, I just want to thank everybody who's watching this video today. And if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe down below. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions about any of these players we're going to talk about today, but we're going to talk strategy. We're talking draft strategy today. So the tight end position, in my opinion, is the most difficult position in fantasy football. Okay. It is the thinnest position. In fact, there is only a handful of players that you can reliably count on a week-to-week basis. Last season, there was only 4 tight ends in the league that had more than 100 targets. Now, you compare that to wide receivers, there was over 30 wide receivers that got more than 100 targets last year in fantasy football. Shoot, even running backs. There was 4 running backs that had over 100 targets last season. So that just shows you there's just not a lot of volume to tight ends. In this season, I was looking at half-point PPR. There's only 5 tight ends that actually rank in the top 100 players for value. Everyone else is past that point. So this league is loaded with tight ends that will end the season with about 50 catches, 500 yards, and 5 touchdowns. What that means is that player is entirely worthless for fantasy unless you happen to start him on a week he gets a touchdown. That's the only time you would be happy to start one of these players. That's a big part of the reason why I say it's a waste to draft a second tight end. The reason is because that second tight end that you have is not going to be any better than any of the tight ends that are going to be sitting on the waiver wire that you could pick up on a bye week or if your guy gets injured. Now, if you have 8 or more bench slots, if you play in a league that has 8 or more bench slots, I would recommend getting a second tight end. And actually, at the end of this video, I have the second tight end that you should target. All right, so stay tuned for that. So here's the next thing about tight ends, and this is the thing that really stinks about them, is in fantasy drafts, tight ends are notoriously overvalued across the board. Okay, in my perfect fantasy draft, what my app will do is it will calculate the projected value of each player and assign a value rank to them. And then you can compare that value rank against their draft position. And if their, let's say their draft position is 50 and their value rank is 80, well, that means they're overvalued by nearly 30 players. So we're talking over 2 rounds of drafting. And I'm going to bring up this chart right now, which is just going to show you this is the difference between their expected draft position and their value in half-point PPR, and you can just see every single one is overvalued. Now, some are only slightly overvalued, and then some are massively overvalued. I mean, take a look at Hunter Henry right now, massively overvalued relative to his draft position. Whereas a player like Ertz or Waller, you can see that the overvalue is relatively small. Okay, so that makes them difficult for your fantasy draft as well, because you actually have to choose to take a negative value player at some point in the draft. So we're going to come back to this in a minute. So I thought maybe the best way to go through this is to break these players into tiers and talk about each tier as to what the strategy should be. So let's start with the elite tier. All right. We already know who these guys are, man. It's Kelsey and it's Kittle. These guys are animals, high target, great offenses. At least Kittle, run first offense. Kelsey's got the best quarterback in the NFL. They're both in a great position. Now, both of them are projected to go in the second round of fantasy drafts. And what I just want to say with that is that do not take either of these players in the second round. The reason for this is because your team can't afford to handicap itself by taking a negative value player so early. So what I like to say is if either of these players somehow fall to your third round pick, I think you should consider taking them. That would be a time that I would consider, yes, I would absolutely take this player in the third round. In the third round, they're both closer to fair value, especially Kelce, which I would not anticipate would ever make it to the third round. But you never know. If in your draft, if that happens, you get to your third pick, Kelce's still on the board, I would take him. Absolutely. But, like I said, right now I've got Kelce. He's overvalued by about 7 places, about 7 people. And Kittle is overvalued by about 12 or 13, so about a full round. So again, if these second round players fall to the third round, they're definitely worth the consideration. I would probably take them if they fall. But the thing is, you're not going to see that in a lot of drafts this year. They're going to go in the second round. So that's my strategy for those guys. Now let's go to the next group, the next tier, which starts in the 4th and 5th round. So there's a little gap there. There's no tight ends are taken in the third round. But starting in the 4th round, you have players Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, and Darren Waller going. Now, right now, Andrews is currently a 4th round pick, and I consider him heavily overvalued at this point. In fact, I have him overvalued by about 3 rounds. Okay, so this is a situation. Andrews is in a situation where he played with a quarterback who had the best touchdown of passing efficiency of any player. It's the lowest volume pass offense in the league that ended up with the highest number of touchdowns. Okay, something's going to revert hard this year, and I think it's going to be the touchdown total. And the reason why Mark Andrews is up here is because he got 10 touchdowns last year. That is huge reversion risk on him right now. And like last season, in 2018, Kelce got 10 touchdowns. And last year, he only got 5 or 6. And let me tell you what, man, I took Kelce in one of my leagues. I took him in a PPR league in the second round. And I was disappointed the whole season. Why? Because he wasn't getting the touchdowns I needed him to get for taking him at that point. That's exactly what Mark Andrews is here. He's still going to get good volume. The offense is going to be great. But because he's going to go from maybe 10 to 5 touchdowns, he's not going to be worth the pick. And you're going to be sorry you took him in the 4th round if, in fact, you did take Mark Andrews. Now, the other 2 guys, on the other hand, I actually really like. Both are going in the 5th round. So Zach Ertz is an early 5th. Darren Waller is a late 5th round pick. So they're easy to get in that round. And first of all, Zach Ertz, man, he is Carson Wentz's favorite target. And despite what you saw last year at the end of last season with Dallas Goedert really coming on, a big reason why Dallas did so well in those final games is because Ertz was playing hurt, man. He had a cracked rib. He had a lacerated kidney. He was still playing, but he was not in good shape. So, again, this year, I fully anticipate Zach Ertz will be the number 1 targeted player in Philadelphia. Excuse me, I almost said Pittsburgh. So he's going to be the number 1. He's going to be the number 1 receiver on that team. You can get him in the 5th round. That's fantastic. Okay. And he's only slightly overvalued at this point, only by about 8 or 9 places. So very good. That's great. It's what you want in these kind of players. And Darren Waller is very much in a similar spot, man. He has a very good chance to end up being the number 1 targeted player on that team this year. But even if he's not, he's going to be heavily targeted. We know that Derek Carr loves his, he loves his tight ends. He will utilize them heavily. And really, this 5th round is what I consider the sweet spot. This is the sweet spot for taking a tight end because you get a nice balance of value versus their draft position. And like I said, both Ertz and Waller are great choices. So they're kind of going to be my primary targets in most drafts that I do. There are some other players that I'm interested in available late, but for value, the value drops off a cliff after this point. Okay, after this tier, when you're talking about these guys, these are all guys that ranked in the top 100 for value ranking. Once we get past this tier, all the players are past the 100th on value ranking. Okay, so you got to understand that. Now, they can still be a good player. They can still be good for your team, especially if you get a guy that ends up as the 6th tight end or the 7th tight end. It's going to give you a positional advantage over at least half the league, that you're playing against. So that's good. But there is a big drop. Now from tier 2 to tier 3. Tier 3 starts right now at the end of the 6th round into the 7th round, okay? And it consists of, let's see here, we've got, who do we have on this round? On this round, we've got Hunter Henry, Evan Engram, Tyler Higbee, and Jared Cook, okay? So when you took Waller was going to give you like 6th round value that you took in the 5th round, right? So you're getting 5th, 6th, 7th round play out of these players. In this tier, these guys, the best value player is like 9th round. Okay. So, as you're waiting longer and longer in the draft to take your tight end, you're losing a lot of value at this point. So, now all these guys are risky for me. When you talk about who they are, Hunter Henry and Evan Engram, both these guys, huge injury risk, right? Neither of these guys have been able to complete a season in the past few years. Now, when they're on the field, they are excellent. When they're healthy, they are excellent. They are a top 6 tight end when they're healthy. But can you really count on them to be that? Hunter Henry has never been that. Evan Engram has done it. He's been very, very good. But again, he gets injured all the time. The one saving grace for Evan Engram is it is a contract year for him. So I love even injury-prone players. I love them in a contract year. They play harder. They play through more injuries. They'll just play through it. So that's good. And if they can put together a full season, they'll absolutely be worth the pick. But right now, they are massively negative in their value. Usually, I'm just looking at the tier right now. Like the best one in this group is probably 3 rounds too early for when they should be selected. You're losing 3 rounds of value. It's not good. It's not a good situation. Let's see here. So who else is in this room? Okay, so Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee is another one that's very popular. He ended the season very strong last year, but don't forget that was after Gerald Everett got injured. Now, Sean McVay, the coach, has said that he wants to get Everett more involved in the offense. To me, that sounds like these guys are going to be sharing time. And in such a thin position where there's such a small amount of targets available to go around, that makes me very nervous in taking someone like Higbee, and his consistency ranking showed that. He was healthy for most of the season last year. But his usage was all over the place, and it didn't really take off until after Everett got injured and didn't play anymore. So again, I don't really like him. And then Jared Cook is another guy, like Mark Andrews, scored a lot of touchdowns last year, but on tiny, tiny volume. I believe he only had about 45 catches, and he got 9 touchdowns in 45 catches. To me, that screams touchdown dependent. To me, that tells me he's going to be reverting on touchdowns, which is the big part of his value. It's a huge risk. I really do not like anybody in tier 3. I would say bypass all of these guys. They all have warts. You've got better options in the next tier. You're going to lose a little value, but it's not going to be as bad. And there's actually a couple of guys that I really like. Okay, so let's move on to the next tier. So the next tier starts at about the beginning of the 9th round, and it includes players. Here's who it includes: Austin Hooper, Rob Gronkowski, Noah Fant, Hayden Hearst, and Mike Gesicki. Now, when we get to this point, we're basically talking these are the first 12 tight ends that are coming off the board. And after this point, the value, again, just continues to just slide off a cliff. And there's really only one more guy that I really like after this tier. So just keep that in mind. But there is another value drop. So it's not as severe as in the prior round where you were losing like 3 rounds of value on any of those guys. On this round, it's you're going to get like 10th to 13th round value out of these players starting in, and they're going in like the 9th and 10th round. So it's not nearly as bad. And really one of them is pretty good. I got to say, Rob Gronkowski rates very, very well here. He is currently coming off. Let's see, where's Gronk coming off? I'm sorry, I got my little cheat sheet over here. Gronkowski is coming off pick number 104, so 9th round. And his value is 119th. So it's you're only going to lose about a round and a half of value. And he's projected to score about 125 fantasy points. So we're talking, he's probably going to get around 700 yards, maybe 6 touchdowns, but that's really good. At this point in the draft, that's actually a decent option. And I wasn't really initially considering Gronkowski because he's coming out of retirement. But at this point in the draft, if you're going to go with a late tight end draft strategy, I'd say, man, Gronkowski is probably your best choice to take, just because of where you can get him. So, hold on, something just happened here. All right, sorry about that little technical issue, but I got it fixed. Okay, so again, Gronkowski I really like. The next guy I really like out of this group is Hayden Hearst, and I like him more for his upside. Right now, his value is, again, not great. You're losing probably around at least 2 rounds of value by selecting him. He's going at, where is Hurst going at? About 109. Okay, so just a little bit. They're basically going at about the same time as Gronkowski's going. But the thing I really love about Hurst is the potential, the upside, the offense that he's on. He's in Atlanta now, a pass-first offense with an elite quarterback. And last year, Austin Hooper was targeted heavily in this offensive system. Austin Hooper ended up with like 97 targets, but he missed 3 games, so he would have been well over 100 targets. He was the tight end 1 before he got injured, and that's why I really, really like him. And to get him in the 9th round, again, that is excellent value. And I just don't think there's a way you can pass up on that if you're going with a late tight end strategy. Those guys, like I said, both those guys really, really good. But everyone else in this tier, not too thrilled with. I mean, Austin Hooper's the first guy, right? We just talked about him, how great he was last year. But now he's moved to Cleveland. There are a lot of mouths to feed in Cleveland. There's a lot of high caliber players there, and the passing volume on the Cleveland offense is substantially lower than what it was in Atlanta. Atlanta last year threw the ball 683 times. Cleveland only threw it like 524, I think that's the number. Anyway, so just that massive decline in passing volume is going to directly impact how much he gets targeted. And so don't expect him to do what he did in Atlanta last season because he's not going to be able to get nearly enough targets to do what he did. So again, he's a bad choice. He's horribly overvalued, over 3 rounds overvalued right now. So again, I would stay away from Hooper. Noah Fant, another one. Again, it's a team that has a lot of offensive talent and a lot of pass catchers and not a high volume passing. They are not anticipated to be high volume passing. And so again, it's going to be limited opportunities and it's going to make him a terrible choice. Really badly overvalued, 3 rounds overvalued. The other one, the last one I want to talk about is Gesicki. And Gesicki really did come on very nicely last year. But you've got to realize 2 things. First of all, he was with Ryan Fitzpatrick, okay? And you never, ever want to rely on Ryan Fitzpatrick in your fantasy draft. You just don't. But it's either going to be Fitz or it's going to be Tua as his quarterback. We don't know who's going to win out. But either way, I can see a severe hit to his utilization just because, both these guys have a high propensity for turnovers. I mean, I'm not saying that Tua has a high propensity for turnovers, but in the NFL, in his rookie season, he sure as heck does. Fitzpatrick, we already know what he can do. How many times have you seen it? How many times have you seen him go into a game and throw 6 picks. I mean, it just happens. That just kills fantasy value. But also, more importantly, new offensive coordinator this year. It's going to be a different system than last year. And if you kind of think that what happened last year is going to continue into this year, I think you're going to be mistaken. And that's what makes him a really big risk here. And kind of took him off of my plate, where I was like, early on, I was very much in on Gesicki as a late round tight end, but with these 2 big changes happening in the team, again, I just think he's a terrible choice for fantasy football. So, it's these guys. Let's see here, both Font and Gesicki, is it both these guys? Yeah, they don't even value in the top 12 tight ends. Font is at like 18 and Gesicki's at 17. So again, these guys, stay away from them. Don't bother with it. You know who you need to go after in this round if you go after it. So there's one more tier, and then you got the chaff, right? And so the final tier, there's only one guy I'm interested in. And this starts in the 11th or 12th round of most drafts. And it concerns these players. So we've got Dallas Goedert, Jonnu Smith, Blake Jarwin, TJ Hawkinson, and Jack Doyle. Now, of this group, the only guy you should be looking here is Jarwin. Seriously, man. Jarwin is the only guy after that, after tier 4, that ranks in the top 12 for tight ends. All right. He's currently valued as the TE11, which don't think that's great because it's not really super great. He is projected to score about 121 fantasy points. So, again, I love his opportunity. We've got, first of all, we got Witten is no longer on the team. And last year, they targeted the tight ends. Dak Prescott targeted the tight ends 124 times between Jarwin and Witten. And then also they got rid of Randall Cobb. So there's another 83 targets up for grabs. So there's plenty of opportunity here for Jarwin to see some nice volume this season, even in this crowded offense that now includes CeeDee Lamb. I think he's going to be just fine. And there is upside here. Again, if he gets over 100 targets, the guy's going to be in the top 6. And I see there's a real good possibility that could happen. So if you wanted to go after a second tight end in your draft, which again, I don't recommend, but if you wanted to get a second one, Jarwin is the guy you should get. So get yourself, if you got yourself Waller and then you got yourself Jarwin, I would be thrilled to death with that pairing. That would be awesome. And again, you would have very safe pairing to work with on any given week that they're going to get good volume and they're going to be top 12 tight ends. And Jarwin is going at about pick number 129. So we're talking, 11th round there. So again, it's not hard to get him. By the time you get to the 11th round, it's mostly backup running backs, wide receiver 3s and 4s. Why not? I mean, take it on Blake Jarwin. Although I got to say, I never draft a second tight end unless I have at least 8 bench slots. If I have 8 bench slots, I would use one of those for a second tight end. So what happens after this point? After this point, we get to what I talk about. A huge group of players that are all going to get around 40 to 50 catches and about 500 yards and about 5 touchdowns. So again, there's no reason to hold them on your bench. They're very interchangeable. And if you're in a situation where your tight end was ever to get injured, these are the group of players you'd have to choose from anyway. You just have to pick your favorite, hope for the best that they score a touchdown because that's the only way they're going to be worth anything. Let's just quickly review then. So here's what I say you should do for tight ends this year. Go elite if you can get him in the 3rd round. So Kelsey or Kittle in the 3rd. If they make it to your 3rd round pick, I would take them. Otherwise, use the 5th round as your target. Get either Ertz or Waller. And those guys will serve you very well this year for fantasy. If you miss in the 5th, the next round to target is the 9th round. That's where you want to target Gronk or Hearst. And then, of course, the final one that you should be targeting is Jarwin in the 11th round. So there you go. So that's it. That's all you have to do, man. It's easy. But like I said, man, 5th round, that's the sweet spot. That is where the value and the draft pick that you have to take there, it's kind of like at its narrowest point, as far as that negative value. And you'll have a guy that you can reliably start every week, and that's the most important thing for fantasy football. So thank you very much for watching the video today. I hope you liked it. Again, if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe. We're going to be doing a lot more stuff this season. We're going to do some more mock drafts. We got other topics we're going to be talking about. So there's lots of good stuff coming. But thank you for taking the time to watch this today. Please comment below as well. Love to hear from you if you want to talk about any of these tight ends or any of the ones that I didn't talk about. I'd be happy to hear from you. So thank you very much. Have yourself a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon. This is Jimmy Maverick.